good? Timer? Alright. A big family meal full of laughter, old family recipes, special food reserved only for the biggest of holidays, or maybe a birthday treat if you ask real nice and your parents like you enough. I never did. These food remind you of your childhood, and a single sight or smell could transport you into the memories you once had once long forgotten. But one doesn't always need something to celebrate something special that they always loved, and a gathering to remind them of something that they lost. For me, there's no other food more special, there's no other food that reminds me of somebody more than a simple hearty sausage biscuit with grape jelly. The greatest man you'll never know is my great-grandfather. He was born in February 18th, 1926 in Greenville, South Carolina. It's a really small town, not much there. He grew up in a poor town, poor family, with no real chance of doing much with his life by standards of what we consider today like doing something with your life. There was no precedence for education. Most of the people there just became farmers. But despite that, my great-grandfather got his high school diploma. He lied about his age so he could go fight in World War II. He was 16 years old, and he joined the Navy. Told him he was 18. He joined the Navy and he became a coxswain. A coxswain is a small boat driver. Today's Navy, coxswains are part of the special warfare community. He drove the small boats to the beach in the South Pacific. He drove the Marines into the beach so they could fight the Japanese. If you remember the opening scene of D-Day, that was this man's life for World War II. He saw more death and destruction than any man should ever see in his entire life. He saw that in 4 years. He saw his friends, other young men getting shot right in front of him. And day in and day out, this man took young men to probably their death. And he had to face his own death. The mortality rate for a coxswain was like 75%, and most of them never made it back. But this man, day in and day out, he did his job because he served his country, and that's what he wanted to do. He was exposed to asbestos and toxins in the water. Asbestos by the U.S. Navy. Of course, it's a very common thing these days. You hear about it all over the place. See the commercials. If you were exposed to asbestos poisoning, there's a class action lawsuit. He was exposed to toxins by the Japanese Army and Navy. They would poison the water in hopes to kill soldiers on their way in. Stuff like that made him lose his hair. But through all this, he was probably one of the happiest people you ever met. Very quiet. Didn't talk too terribly much. The thing he loved most of all was sweets, candy, pie. He was a simple man, but he was a great man. When he came home, he started dating my great-grandmother. She was a bit of a player, I guess. She used to tell stories about how she would have two men come to her house at the same time, one at the front door and one at the back door, and she would decide at that time which one she was going to go out with. She was a boss lady. She was awesome. But she ended up marrying my great-grandfather. It was the only man that her dad ever liked. They ended up getting married. They had 2 kids. Scarlett, the oldest, everybody calls her Cookie. She's my grandmother. And Terry, who is the younger daughter. Scarlett, or Grandma Cookie as I call her, had 2 kids herself. My mother, the oldest, and her younger brother, Chris. When my mom was about 5 years old, my grandfather left. And my great-grandfather stepped in to the role of father and helped provide for my mom's family. He taught them everything from how to drive a tractor, drive a car, helped them with their homework, took them to school, took them to practices. Every role a father should do that their father was never around to do, my great-grandfather stepped in because that was the type of man he was. If you want further proof of the type of man this man was, he would give homeless people jobs just to help them out. If they didn't know how to do something, he would teach them how to do a job, and then he would pay them to do the job he taught them how to do, just so that they could have some food, so they could have some skills, so they could go get some other jobs. he would take them to interviews, and he would vouch for them. He would be their reference, and he would get them jobs. For no other reason than because it was the right thing to do. He was a tough man. When my uncle was about 8, my great-grandfather was building a house for my great-grandmother. That's what she wanted. Well, he ended up cutting his thumb off with a saw. Didn't freak out at all. Calmly took his shoelace off, tied his thumb up, found his thumb, put it on some ice, cleaned the blood up because he didn't want my great-grandmother to freak out, went, got my uncle out of a tree he was playing in, and drove to the hospital. Came back that night. That was it. But he didn't have a simple life. All things considered, he had a lot of health problems. He had 3 heart attacks, 2 strokes, 2 clogged arteries. He lost a kidney. He had cataracts in his eyes. And when the doctor told him not to raise his hands above his curtain, he put up my great-grandmother's curtains and lost an eye. In his later years, he had diabetes, he had Alzheimer's and dementias, and asbestos poisoning. And he smoked for over 40 years. After his second heart attack, his doctor said, "You need to change your diet and stop smoking." He fired the doctor. He was going to live his life the way he wanted to live his life. He ended up quitting smoking, but he never changed his diet. He was a special type of man. As far as I can remember, there was never a person you would want to know more in your entire life. So simple. He would sit on his swing porch most of the days after he stopped working, and he would just sit there and he'd wave to people passing by, and everybody, didn't matter who you were, he'd wave at you. You'd wave at him. He was just a sweet old man. How do you not love this man? I always did. I was lucky enough to live next door to this man for 5 years, from ages of 1 to 6. Pretty much every day I was hanging out with him. We were so tight that I have a nice scar on my head because of it. Because when I was about a little over 1 year old, he came into the house and I wanted to see him so bad, I crawled out of my crib and I fell and I hit my head on a screw and cracked my skull open, trying to get to this man. Everybody says I was his favorite. That's true. I'm not gonna lie. It was just when, I'm sure a lot of you have that family member, that grandparent, or your parent that you just have this kind of connection with. And no matter what it is that happens in your life, you feel it. And you always want to be there for that person. And they're always there for you. And that's who this man was for me. He taught me how to drive when I was 5 years old. He let me drive his car around the property because he had about 9 acres, so he just let me drive. He taught me how to drive a tractor. He let me cut the grass all by myself, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever. He had a big orange tractor, and I would just drive around the property, just having fun. It was these type of memories you'd never forget. And yeah, I will be telling my kids this, and I'll be doing my best to convey to you and to my kids eventually just what this man can mean to me. You'll never understand it. When he was in his 70s, he had a paper route he used to do all the time. He'd go in the morning, he'd go pick up some paper, and he'd deliver to all these businesses. And I would go with him all the time, and that's where my personal object comes in. Every morning, we'd go to Hardee's together. We'd get a sausage biscuit with grape jelly. He'd get a black coffee, I got orange juice. But we had this breakfast together every day. We'd go to the businesses together, and everybody on the paper route knew him. I said, "Hey, Mr. Cook, hey, Justin." They'd give me treats, candies. I got a lot of mementos from that. I still have them. One of their good friends had flags from around the world, and they would give me a flag every time I came in. A nice collection of flags from around the world that I got from that. But through all that, the thing that really sticks out to me the most is Hardee's, where every Sunday we would go, especially on Sundays, and we'd see the after-church crowd who all knew my grandfather. They all call him Junior. And they would talk to him. He would talk for a few minutes, but then he would kind of shoo them away, and we would go sit in our usual seat and we'd eat sausage biscuit with grape jelly. And no matter how old I got, no matter where I went in my life, it always came back to this. Every time I went home to see him, we did this. At least once every trip. I'd take him out, we'd go get a sausage biscuit with grape jelly. Didn't fail. When I was in the Navy, I was a bosun's mate third class. A lot of coxswains are bosun's mates. I'm proud to say that I followed in his footsteps, and I've done a lot of things that he did, especially in his Navy career. A lot of the qualifications, I did a lot of things based on what he was as a man and who I wanted to be as a man. I'm nowhere near the man that he is. But if I could be a fraction of that man, then I'm going to be a good man. And I'll be a man that'll raise my kids in a way that is good. He was always a type of a moral, how many health problems can a man have, and never seemed to stop moving, but never had a problem. But as I neared getting out of the Navy, his health kind of rapidly deteriorated. About 2 months before I got out, I was moving to South Carolina to actually live in their house with them. He got put in the hospital.
Take a deep breath.
And it's not something you expect from this man. He's a World War II veteran. He was 89 years old, and he did a lot for me and my family.
Take a deep breath. Just breathe. That's all you're gonna do. Just breathe.
If we'll go to this picture actually right here. That's my pop. That's my mama. That's his wife. That's my mom. That's me. That's my daughter. It's 5 generations in one picture. He got to see his great-great-granddaughter. How many people get to do that?
That's right. That's right.
This was taken 3 days before he died. Asbestos poisoning affects your body in a very specific way. Imagine somebody poured cement into your lungs, and it just dry. I mean, that's all there is to it. At the end, you only have about 10% function of the lungs, and he just couldn't breathe. There's nothing he could do about it. There's nothing we could do about it. Just what it is. But he held on long enough. I mean, my grandmother drove up from Florida. The next day, she got to say goodbye. My brother and sister came up. Everybody got to say their goodbye. It's like he knew he wasn't going to be there, so he held on long enough to see everybody. And the day he died, it was everybody except for my brother and sister. He got to see his great-granddaughter, his great-great-grandkids. He got to see everybody. It's no one lives forever. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
It never gets easier, but as you move on.
You have to.
So, in the end, I have this. I have a bunch of these. Just amazing pictures of a man you'll never know. A man you'll never ever read about. Remember to see a movie on his life. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I got this. And I got these. And if I could teach my kids half of what he taught me, then they have me too. Then I did my job.